Hi, my name is Bruce Bell, and I am a tour guide here in Old Town Toronto. And over the last 20 years, I've done hundreds of tours here in St. James Park. And I think what a lot of people, a lot of Torontonians especially, forget is just how new this park is. A lot of people think it's been here for a couple of hundred years. It has that look to it, but it isn't. It's only about 40 years old. Before, this was a very vibrant neighborhood full of commercial buildings and stores and banks, and streets used to run through here. Francis Street was the most famous street that we had here, named for Francis Collins, who was an early newspaper man. But eventually, as town grew, they needed more of this land, so the church had sold off their cemetery, and they moved a lot of the bodies up to the new St. James Cemetery out in Cabbagetown, and buildings started to erupt here about 150 years ago. And the most famous building that once stood here in this park was Nasmith Bakery, over there in the corner just behind me at Jarvis and Adelaide. And it was a real going concern. Originally that land would have been a public oven back in the early colonial days, and then eventually it grew into this wonderful bakery. And just across the street was another bakery that was Mr. Christie's Cookie Factory. So the smells would have been quite awesome here. But by 1950, this area was it was not a nice place. There was a huge fire here that destroyed most of the inner part of the neighborhood that was here, and a lot of the warehouses were very dilapidated. And so in 1960, the church owned this land. They sold the land to the city on the promise that they would build a park. So eventually, by the 1970s, that all came down. All that rubble, all the warehouses, including the quite nice buildings that would have been facing King Street. And this beautiful park was laid out. And now, here we are. One of the most beautiful spots that we have here in Toronto, on ancestral land of our First Nations, and eventually the town of York, and now the city of Toronto.